Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast. Today we are speaking with Jenna, and I am not even going to try to massacre your last name as I normally do. So, what is your last name?
Brocious.
Brocious. Okay, great. I'm
Mhm.
talking to Jenna Brocious. She is a spiritual intuitive guide, and she creates these prayer cards that she sells to people, but she's going to talk to us a little bit about her journey and how she came to be where she is at, which is fascinating, and I can hardly wait to share it with everyone. So, welcome to the show, Jenna. It's been a long time coming.
Hello.
We've gone back and
Yes,
forth for
thank
a
you for
while.
having me. I'm so excited.
So,
Mhm.
how did you get started? How
Whew.
was your
You know,
start?
I was doing real estate and still just not feeling like I have like fulfilled that purpose within me. And so my husband gave me the opportunity to kind of like sit for 6 months and really just dive in and focus on what I wanted to do. And so I sat on the floor of my office and I prayed and I meditated and I journaled and I was crying, big old mess most of the time. But in that came to me my positive intention prayer cards, which has turned out to be such a beautiful product and it resonates with so many people. I love that it was something that just beautifully naturally came out of me. God, source, whatever you want to call it, blessed me with this idea. And once I put it into like focus and moving it forward with momentum, it came out so easy. And I've realized when things are supposed to happen, the flow will just naturally go well. And so now I am on my second project of writing a book, and that image and that story came to me so strongly just in the way the prayer cards did. So I'm just here trying to live my best life.
That sounds fantastic. I totally get the whole, it comes easy when you're in your state of flow, like where you're supposed to be. I kind of felt that way when I started
Mhm.
this podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting. It was I was doing something totally different. And then it just was like, I'm supposed to do this. So I just started, and I didn't even know who I was supposed to talk to, but I just started and people came. And
Mhm.
now lots of people come. And it,
Mhm.
it really, I feel like it is making a difference. And people are getting the message that there's hope and the world isn't going to end tomorrow. And there are people out there
Mhm.
trying to make a difference in the world. And people like you that have had a journey and you're just listening to what you've been told to do and stepping out in it in faith. Do you want to talk a little bit about how let's talk about the scary side of that a little bit, because it
Oh,
takes courage.
oh. It does take courage. And, I've actually lost quite a few friends on this journey because they didn't believe me. They didn't understand me. They couldn't mentally come to the same level that I was on. And it was really hard to let some of those friendships go. But I think the thing that I have to remember that if it's not meant for me, it's not meant for me. And I have to just graciously let it go. And like, if I don't get invited to that business thing, I have to graciously let that go because for some reason I'm not supposed to be there and that's not my purpose. Um, but I think the dark side can be really sad and scary. And I think that we're allowed to have those moments because that's the contrast that also will let us know what we do want. So I always appreciate when something shows itself that I don't want because I'm like, oh, that was a good reminder. That's not what I want. I'm going to move the other direction. So I think having those really dark moments are just as valuable as those beautiful, shining, loving moments because it shows the contrast, of course. So, did I answer that one fully for you? I can go deeper and darker.
Yeah, go deeper and darker. Let's dig in.
um, let's go there. So, I was raised by a single mom who was an alcoholic. I didn't meet my dad until the age of 36. And I had a lot of challenges. My mom dated a motorcycle gang member for a couple years. So it was me alone a lot with a single mom working. But I think that all of that like struggle really just gave me the motivation to come out of whatever I was in. And I knew that whatever my mom was living wasn't for me. And I just like, I grinded, I worked hard. I put my feet to the ground and my head down, and I just like moved for many, many years. And I think that it all really truly paid off in the end, because now I live a beautiful life that I could have only dreamt of. And I get to live a happy life because I choose to be happy every day. Nobody in my family chooses to be happy, and that's their choice. I choose to live a different way. So I think we just have to remember that that darkness can either be our motivator or our hindrance. And what do you choose to make it?
Absolutely. And reframing all of the stories that you could have told yourself about, this is my lot in life, and my mom's like this, so I don't have the ability to make different decisions and choose a different
Mm-hmm.
path for myself. And there are so
Mm-hmm.
many people that get trapped in that, and
Mm-hmm.
until you have, that breakthrough moment where it's like, you know I can I can do whatever I want. If I can imagine it, it
Mm-hmm.
can happen. I mean, they got spider
For
goats.
sure.
Let me tell you, if they got
Yes.
spider goats, you can do anything.
Yeah, it was interesting. My mom got herself in trouble a freshman year of college, and it was the night before my first college final. And she calls me at 2 a.m. to bail her out of jail. And I was like, she obviously isn't worried about my school test. She's more worried about herself. And that was kind of the light bulb that went off on my head, that I was like, I have to create distance. I have to create boundaries, or this is going to be my whole life of her like taking over and me stopping what I'm doing to work or help her. And so that was the big light bulb when I was 19, that I had to get out of my small hometown. And somebody was moving to Arizona, and I was like, can I hop in your car and ride with you? And he said, pack your bags, let's go. And so really me going from Washington to Arizona and creating that huge boundary necessary for my mother and
Mhm.
I really just allowed for me to create whatever world I wanted. And it could have been the same life that she lived, or it could have been what it is now. And so we have the choice to make decisions, just make the right ones sometimes. They might be hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah, there's that old adage about sowing and reaping, and I like that in terms of decisions. The decisions you make today, you're not going to reap the repercussions of those decisions necessarily right away. But you do need to make the decision. You need to plant that seed so the plant has an opportunity to grow, and in, whatever the time frame is that it needs to develop, it will bring you a reward. It'll, you know, give you something to reap at the end.
Yeah.
And making hard decisions is like you're already living in the result of the decisions that either you made or were made for you prior to where you
Mm-hmm.
are when you start making these hard decisions to do things that are not easy. It's not easy to leave your home when you're 19 and travel halfway across the country to start a new life, and you don't have any idea what that new life is going to look like. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to find some way to support yourself because living
Yeah.
on the street,
No, it,
sound romantic, but
no, living, no, not at all. I was lucky. I had some girlfriends that needed a roommate, and I'd never met them. And I was like, sure, I'll take the room, not knowing what was going to happen. And I came down here with like $2,000. I worked all summer to save that $2,000, and I bought myself a car for $1,000, and the door handle wouldn't work and the trunk wouldn't open. I mean, it was just wild, but it was on me, and nobody else could tell me what to do. And so that was the freedom that I needed. And I worked 3 jobs for like 4 years just to like rent, insurance, food in my mouth, clothes, all the things. But I wouldn't take that time back at all now. It almost makes me want to cry, because it got me to where I am now. So I'm like so grateful for all of that. I'm grateful for the struggle because it got me to where I am.
yeah, the struggle is really, really important in life. And, that I was
Mm-hmm.
talking to a gentleman yesterday, and he was talking about the hero's journey. We all have a hero's journey, and but then we have other journeys that we get into, and but the hero's journey kind of like develops something in us that fundamentally makes us who we are. And it's interesting because everybody's story is different. I know you're an intuitive. How did that play into all of this? Did you know that you were
Ooh,
intuitive when you were
that
young?
was You know what? Now looking back, I can tell you like my gut instincts as a child were very right on. If I would go to bed with a stomach ache, and then that would be the night my parents would get into a fight or something. So I've always really had it within me, I think, until I really was able to sit down in those 6 months and really explore what I was trying to do. Did I see the bigger version of myself and what I was capable of? I'd always had dreams of people, and I'd call them and they'd be like, oh, that happened yesterday, or I'm hoping that happens. And so I would have all these things that would happen. So I went to a little school in Atlanta, and they really taught me how to hone my craft into being a spiritual guide. And it's a beautiful gift because I'm able to deliver messages from people that have passed away to people that are here now that really need to hear the messages. And sometimes people don't want to hear the messages, and I have to respect their boundaries when it comes to sharing that, and I don't. But I call it my superpower. I love it because I can walk into a room and instantly know the energy and where do I lie within that energy of, do we need to pump up the party or do I need to bring it down a notch? You know what I mean? Is kind of my vibe. But it can be also very scary because there are lots of information about lots of things that you're not always wanting to know. But I love
Yeah.
being able to share my gift with people.
And do you do that? Were you doing it one-on-one? Are you thinking about, you know, re
Yes.
revamping that? Are you looking? I know you're writing a book. Is the book going to be
Mhm.
about this? Where are you going? What's in store next for
So
you?
I am currently not seeing clients. It became a very overwhelming responsibility and task to really know everybody's deep, dark secrets. And so for me, also trying to be a wife and a mother and keep this house going on a full-time basis, it just was really draining on my energy. And so I've decided to take a step back from that. I do still receive messages and call people and let them know if they're interested. I have something for them. I don't ever want to shut that off because I do think it is a superpower.
Mhm.
But over the summer, I was really struggling with my marriage. I'm married for 9 years, and I had only ever seen my mother either be the cheater or be cheated on. And so I'm 9 years into this marriage going, when is he going to cheat on me? Like that's how it goes. You cheat and I run. So when is this going to happen? And I finally just realized that that wasn't my story. That was my mom's story. And just because that's my mom's story doesn't mean it's my story. Oh, I'm going to cry again. And so God really laid on my heart that I have to write this book about this generational trauma of shame and guilt that I was carrying around that wasn't even mine. And so it's been a beautiful opportunity. The words have been absolutely flowing out of me. When I was sitting in that place about this book, I mean, they showed me what the book cover is supposed to look like and everything. So when I get those images and those inspirations, I know it's time to take action. And I had been asking for some action because I felt a little bored in a sense of where am I going next. So I'm just hoping the words continue to flow.
Can't help but not. I mean, it sounds like you're where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to be doing. And when that happens, it just is easy. The things that are
Yes, the
supposed to
easiness
come along,
again.
they just come along. And you
Mm-hmm.
can just kind of relax into it and let it happen
Mm-hmm.
instead of struggling to make something happen. And what do you have to say to people who are struggling to make something happen?
I think the thing that I learned the most from sitting in those 6 months on my office floor, and it doesn't take 6 months, it's totally up to everybody's own lifestyle. But I think when we just give ourselves the moment to actually sit quietly and turn off all the noise and really just sit there, like I would pray and then I would meditate, and meditate is listening. And when I gave myself that opportunity, I really did see my purpose and what was I supposed to do and what am I here to be. So I think it's really just giving yourselves those opportunities to just listen quietly. I think that really, I think we love to get wrapped up in the busyness of life. And when I see people that are too busy, I'm like, oh, what are you running from or you don't want to hear? And so I think when you're able to just really give yourself that quiet opportunity is when you will find the most beautiful treasures.
Do you make it a practice of meditating like every day, or is it something that you just when you feel the need?
Um, I try to do it every day. Life can get in the way, but I really do try to take at least 20 minutes. I'll go sit outside and I'll just put my feet on the ground and listen to the birds and just really give myself that opportunity to align with myself for the day. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I have to sit in my car in a parking lot waiting for a kid to come out of school to get that minute to like really allow myself to listen. But I do think just giving yourself that quiet time every day really does set myself up for success personally.
Do you think that practicing listening makes it easier when you're like going through your day to just slow down and
Mm-hmm.
listen? I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily in a full-on meditation, but just do you find yourself at times just recognizing that you're just going to sit there for a second or a minute or five
I mean,
minutes and just like,
just be quiet. Yeah, I sometimes find myself driving in my car with no sound just because sometimes that's the only place I'll allow myself to like listen or think, or if I'm having gut issues, or I'm my husband's a president of a company and we, we'll be discussing many issues and he'll be like, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, sit down and listen to what your gut says. Is it a hell yes or is it a hell no? And I think really just giving ourselves those opportunities is, I went to many psychics and card readers and all these people telling me what to do and where should I go and what's my next step. But I realized until I sat quietly, those answers were within, but they weren't coming from anybody else. And so I think we look at the outside world for all the answers when if we just sit quietly, it's actually within us the whole time.
yeah, that still small voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you
But my
have
favorite
to be
voice.
quiet to hear it. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
so it is actually one of my favorite stories of the Bible. It's Elijah, and he's sitting in the cave,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all this noise going on around him, but it's the quiet voice when you can still all the stuff going on around you and just listen, then you hear. And it just comes to you. It doesn't even like I'm not clairvoyant. I think that's the way that's it's termed. But
Yeah.
I do
Mm-hmm.
I do know there's a difference between the voice in my head, which is me, and
Mm-hmm.
when I'm getting a download from something else. And
Mm-hmm.
and you won't ever hear that if you continue to just stay busy and run loops. That's another thing that people tend to do. They just run loops of things, conversations they'll never have that are really detrimental to only you because you're not hurting that other person. They're never going to hear what you have to say.
Right.
And you get
Yeah.
stuck in
I
that and
found,
this noise.
yeah, I've found for me as a child, I journaled actually a lot, which is funny that my little self knew to journal then. But when I have those loops in my head or that story I'm telling myself, really journaling it out really stops the loop for me. I guess because I've gotten it out of my head and onto paper, I feel like I can actually let go of it now. But journaling, if you are the person that are in your head a lot, I would say journal as much as you can because it is the most beautiful release that nobody else has to know about.
Yeah, and if you're really worried about it, burn the pages when you're done. You know, then
Yes,
no one will
totally,
see it because
100%.
it
Yes,
doesn't
and you're
it
still
doesn't
releasing it.
yeah, yeah. And I think having it go up in smoke kind of like helps you cement the
Yes.
angst about it. But um
Mm-hmm.
do you think that maybe writing this book is a little bit like journaling for you?
Oh, I mean, I've really had to dig deep for some personal stories that I haven't thought about or really reconsidered in a long time. So I some days I'm just writing and crying all at the same time, and some days it just flows out of me and I have to read back what I said. But I think this is a very therapeutic moment for me that sometimes I'm not always. It's a lot. It's a very heavy topic and energy and a lot of sadness and loneliness attached to it. So it's been interesting to say the least.
It sounds like it's going to have a really fantastic ending because you're in a great place right now.
Yeah, no, I'm choosing my marriage over the stories that I've only ever seen or been told. And the whole time I'd had this internal battle of, he's a great guy, he's loyal, there's nothing wrong. Like, why am I having these silly stories in my head? There's nothing to even, there's no story to have. And so, yeah, it's, and then my greatest hope is that, the generational trauma stops here, and that my son never experiences the things that I've experienced. And so that's the biggest goal, is that we can all acknowledge it and do better for the next.
I think that's a really important thought, because for so many generations um, that I'm aware of, there's just been like this, and it hasn't even, it's gone kind of in a up and down sort of way. In my grandparents' generation, infidelity and that wasn't like it was, and I'm going to say was, in like the 70s and 80s. The 70s and 80s was
Mm-hmm.
just full of a bunch of really dark sexual trauma that eh, so many
Mm-hmm.
people experienced, whether it's cheating spouses, women trying to like figure out how to make a life for themselves, because they weren't brought up to make a
Mm-hmm.
life for themselves. They were brought up to get married
Right.
and depend on their husband. And then
Mm-hmm.
the whole civil rights movement happened. And even though the amendment didn't get ratified, that civil rights amendment in 64 really impacted women. It allowed them to have some equality in the marketplace that they didn't have before. And it was the transition in the 70s and 80s. And I was a young woman in those days, and I can remember all of the garbage that went on, the really ugly stuff. And then towards the 90s and after 2000, I think people started shifting a little bit. That generation of kids that, like my older kids, they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and they
Mm-hmm.
they don't want that crap for their kids, and they make
Mm-hmm.
intentional decisions about the way they're going to live their lives for their kids. And so
Mm-hmm.
my younger kids, they're just like, no, this is just the way it is. I don't have to go and get married. If I choose to get married, I'm going to
Right.
do it in this way. And I'm going to choose this for
Right.
my family. And it's more an equal footing than it ever was
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s and 80s. And you know, I've got all kinds of stories about things that happened because of women ending up divorced and not having any way to support themselves, and really no
Mm-hmm.
support systems around them. But
Mm-hmm.
it's it's encouraging to me today to see the changes that are happening, and the people that are, and it's mostly women, but there are some men involved, stepping up to just try and make a difference in the world, offering their services to
Mm-hmm.
help somebody else shorten their learning curve so that they can get to that better spot faster and easier than it
Mm-hmm.
happened for them. And I think you writing your book is kind of a journaling of that whole process. I think it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on and
Yeah, no, it's really, and no, you're totally fine. It's actually a really interesting topic, because until I was able to look at my mom's childhood and look at my grandma, and my grandma was a single mom in the 60s trying to make her way with two kids and trying to survive. It wasn't until I looked at my mom's childhood and I had like more compassion and understanding and empathy, that she didn't have it easy. She did not have a loving situation at home with two parents and dinner on the table at 5 by any means. That was not her situation. So for me to have these like amazing ideas of who my mother's going to be isn't really the reality that I live in. And so it was like a lot easier for me to forgive her when I was able to have that compassion and empathy and understanding from where she came from.
yeah,
And here we are
and
to change it.
Yeah, and recognizing it, I think, is the first step. Knowing that this
Mhm.
person was this way, and yeah, it is their fault, but they didn't know any better. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have coaches. They were just really out there on their own doing the best they could with what they had, you know. And a lot of us had
Yeah.
crappy moms. You know, but at
Yeah.
some point you
Yeah,
just have to
I
forgive
think
them
it's
and
so.
move on.
Mhm. Well, yeah, because I also want to have peace for myself. And so for me to find my own peace, it was really having to find this forgiveness for her and going down that road. And so I have great empathy, and I know she's a badass, strong woman, and she did the best that she could. And all I can do is love her for that. And that's where we lie.
Yeah. And that's and recognize that, that was the human being she was when you were little. She's going
Mm-hmm.
to grow up too. When you have kids, and you have a
Mm-hmm.
son, you know this too. You're still growing up. You're having babies, but you're still not done yourself. I don't think we ever finish being done.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom is probably a totally different person than she was when you were young. I would hope.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I actually just saw my mom for the first time in 5 years. I went home for my 20-year high school reunion, and I saw her, and I was nervous to see her because I speak publicly about my childhood. And she has kind of denied a lot of the stuff that happened in my childhood for a very long time, which was really hard for me, again, to process stuff. But it was one thing that she said to me that stood out that I just still don't understand. Is she goes, my mom was such a mean, miserable person. All I wanted to do is be happy and have fun. And I was like, well, I love you for saying that, but you were maybe took the fun over the edge. Maybe we should have reeled it back in just a little bit, because my mom was wild and crazy and loved to have fun. But that's what got her into trouble all the time. So, it's wild. But for me to hear my mom say that she wanted to be a happy person, I don't remember her being a happy person as a child. So it was so interesting to hear her say that and be like, huh, I don't remember that part of my childhood.
I think search for happiness often involves a lot of alcohol and drugs and sex,
Mm-hmm.
and those are not the
Mm-hmm.
answer. And it's taken, many decades for us to realize that, sitting quietly in sobriety and just listening is is really where the happiness is found. And
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people out there banging that gong saying, hey, you don't have to do this. You don't have to search for happiness. Happiness just exists, and you
Mm-hmm.
can be
Woo,
happy.
preach.
It's taken me a long time to get
You
there
just
too.
have to make the choice. I know, but it's just like the day I realized that the world was for me and not against me is the day I had like three people open the door for me. Somebody took my grocery cart from the parking lot. But it's weird when you just shift your perspective, how it all just like can really not change, but change all at the same time.
I think you just become aware of the good things. When you focus on the good,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you see. When you focus on, I'm feeling miserable, and, people who drink a lot feel miserable most of their time when they're not drinking,
Mm-hmm.
because alcohol's a poison, and it affects your body, and it affects your ability to think. And
And
it just,
yeah.
it makes you feel bad. And so you don't see the things that are happening. You don't have the clarity to see the things that are happening that are good, and just focus on that part. And it's like, it's just a shift, but the shift is
Yeah.
massive. Makes
Yeah.
such a
And it's
huge
a lot more
difference.
fun to think that it's way more fun to think happy than negative.
Yeah. And it's way more fun when you realize that you don't have to run loops through your head. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to worry about things, because no matter what happens, it's probably just going to happen. There's not anything that you can do by worrying that's going to change anything. And if you can just quiet your mind, you might come up with a solution that was not going to present itself until you just stopped worrying about it. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, and worry is so connected to anxiety and control, and neither one of those things are also serving you. So it's just like you got to let it go, you got to release it and let the universe do its job.
I heard somebody say one time that you just got to step out and the ground will get solid beneath your feet. And you just got to keep stepping and
Mm-hmm.
trusting that the
Mm-hmm.
universe is there to help you and wants the best for everyone, because I believe we're all connected. And when you're doing your best, it and what you're supposed to be doing, it has a ripple effect around you. It's like you get messages that you share with people. Big ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the coolest part is that then they realize how close those people are to them when they feel so far away, which is such a beautiful gift.
Yeah. And those prayer cards that you created and you sell in your Etsy shop, and we're going to put the link to that in the show notes. But when what are they? How do people use them?
So they're positive intention prayer cards. So I was actually in my office in 2019, came up with the idea. The idea came to me, and
Mhm.
then COVID hit. And so I'm in COVID trying to take care of a 3-year-old and my husband's company. We don't know what's going to happen. And I was really struggling mentally to keep my head in that positive space all the time, which was not easy. And so I was trying to find positive prayers and Googling and trying to find something. And so once we got out of the meat of COVID, I really was able to sit down and focus and very intentionally create 8 prayer cards. There's peace, love, positivity, grief, worthiness, strength, change. And I just added a travel one because I had a couple of moms ask for their kids for a travel prayer card. But there is a prayer that's been written, and then there's a Bible verse that correlates with the prayer that I wrote. But I just wanted it to be easy. Like the grief prayer card I wrote for a girlfriend whose son passed away, and I wanted her to have something to say without having to think about it. And so that one holds a special place in my heart. The worthiness prayer card, I was around all these amazing women that didn't see it, and so I wrote the prayer card for them. So there's 8 of them now, and they're all individually sold on Etsy. And I can't wait to send you some so that you can enjoy them as well.
I'm excited for it too.
But it's great because they're the size of a credit card, so they can fit in the back of your phone and your pocket and your purse. So I was really trying to be very intentional about how easily you could use them wherever you go.
And they're very pretty. You know, I'm kind of into an aesthetic thing. The printing on them is nice and it's good size. You can
Mm-hmm.
actually read it, even if you need glasses, but you won't wear them. And they look like they're
Thank
pretty
you.
sturdy as well, which is
Yes, I
they're
made
not
that
just look.
very intentional too. Mhm. Mm-mm.
And are they all handmade or do you have them printed? Are
I
they
have them printed.
okay? Very cool. So, is
Yes.
there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with today? Like one major takeaway that you think they should ponder?
Something that really changed my life was when I was about to commit to that 6 months and I was really struggling with my mother and other things going on. My husband told me, you can't hold somebody to an expectation they did not agree to. And for me, that changed my whole perspective on many, many relationships because I had a story in my head. They had a different story in their head, and we did not meet in the middle. And we'd both be mad at each other. So, not holding people to expectations they have not agreed to is biggest, big life changing moment for me when I realized that.
Yeah, and for you, not for them,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't even know
Mm-hmm.
about it.
No, for me.
For you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like forgiveness. It's not for the other person. It's for the person who needs to do the forgiving. If somebody comes to you and
Mm-hmm.
asks for forgiveness, that's a different story. And they better be making changes because if they're asking you for forgiveness and not changing, then they're asking you to excuse their bad behavior. And you need to understand that there's
Right.
differences in those words and those intentions behind the words. But yeah, forgiveness is a huge thing. Not holding people
Mm-hmm.
to agreements that they didn't agree to. I love that.
Mhm.
I love that a lot. Thank you
Isn't
so
that,
much for
I
joining me
was like,
today. Yeah.
thank you for having me.